right, so this class we are making, as you know, we're making some cauliflower tacos, and the cauliflower is going to have toasted walnuts in it, so it's going to have a nice crunchy texture, lots of really delicious spices in there as well. And the other items that we're adding into the taco are pineapple black bean salsa and a guacamole, and then we're going to top it all off with some cotija cheese and some flour tortillas. So some food safety tips at the top of the class. So any cans that you open, tomato paste, black beans, anything you don't use, please be sure to, food safety wise, it's important to use that within 5 days. Put it in your fridge and use it within 5 days. Same with any leftover, uncut or cut veggies or fruits that you're going to have for tonight. And let's see, we're going to be practicing the phrase mise en place. This is a French culinary practice, and I'm going to be talking about that a lot tonight, especially while we're chopping all the things at the beginning of this class. And let's see, I mentioned washing your herbs, washing your produce. And always be sure that you're very careful with your knife. A sharp knife is better and safer than a dull knife, because a dull knife doesn't get a very good grip and it can slip and cut your hand. So just be very careful. And yeah, we're going to be cooking with some heat as well. So just have oven mitts and whatever you need handy just to keep yourself safe. And for the plan of work is the process that we go through to make sure that everything is ready at the same time. And the plan of work for tonight's class is that we're going to cut a lot of the produce items first and then make our pineapple black bean salsa, put that aside. Then we're going to work on our cauliflower and get that cooking. Then we're going to make the guacamole, and then we're going to assemble everything at the end. So I think we're ready to kick it off. I'm going to share my overhead screen as well, so you can see what I'm doing here. Here's my cutting board. So, all right, I'm gonna jump into it. So the first thing we're gonna be cutting is this pineapple. I have half a whole pineapple, half of a pineapple. If you have canned pineapple, you're saving yourself some time, but I'm just gonna show how to cut this pineapple. So it used to be whole, obviously. I'm gonna cut this end off, and also hold when you're cutting, especially with a big chef knife like this, the best way, the most ergonomic way is to make sure you're holding on to the base of this knife and you're wrapping your fingers around the handle. So rather than holding it all the way down here, you're holding it up here and then wrapping the rest around. That is a good way to make sure that your knife is like an extension of your arm and it takes some of the pressure off of your wrist. All right, so I'm going to cut off the end of this pineapple. Shaking my camera here. Cut off the end of the pineapple. And I'm going to cut down the edges of the pineapple to cut off that tough skin on the outside. So like I said, if you bought canned pineapple, that is definitely something that can be substituted. My only suggestion for canned pineapple is that you choose pineapple that is canned in juice rather than canned in syrup, for kind of obvious reasons. Syrup is just sugary, syrupy stuff compared to the actual pineapple juice, which comes from the pineapple. It's no added sugar, it's all natural sugar. So I've got my pineapple edges are cut off, and I'm not going to be making as much as you all are because it's just me eating this tonight for dinner. I'll bring it home to my house as well and share it with my boyfriend. But aside from that, I don't need to make enough for 4 servings. So I'm only going to be making a little bit of this pineapple. So I was standing it on end and the core of the pineapple goes down this way, and I chopped it right down the middle. Now I'm going to lay it down flat and chop it down the middle again. And there's still the core of the pineapple in here. It doesn't really look very different than the rest of the pineapple, but we've all bit into hard pieces of pineapple before. So that was the core. That's a little bit, not as enjoyable to eat. So I'm gonna lay it down on a flat side and cut at a diagonal. And now the core is gone. All right, so we're gonna dice up this pineapple. So if you had canned pineapple, you might want to dice it a little bit smaller for a salsa. So if it's canned, if it's already diced, you can just spread it out on your cutting board and just kind of roughly chop it. But what I'm doing here is cutting this into planks. And you're gonna see me doing this a lot tonight. The process of cutting into planks first, then laying the planks like down on their side. They're laying down, and then you cut it into strips. All right, now we've got all of our strips, and then we turn it 45 degrees and cut it into cubes. So this is the process of dicing. You can do this process with pretty much everything. If you have any loose big pieces, you can just do a quick chop through, but this looks good to me. So I'm gonna push this pineapple over to the side, and we're gonna move on to our next item that we're gonna dice. We're gonna do the red pepper next. So red bell pepper, all bell peppers have, essentially the same shape, but there's a really cool trick. One of my favorite culinary tricks is involving a bell pepper. So what you're gonna do is chop off that whole top part, flip it around, and chop off the bottom as well. You're gonna pick up the top, and we're gonna use this part of the pepper. We don't have to throw this away. What I'm doing is just popping out the stem, and then the rest of this is completely usable. So I'm only throwing away this little stem. Now, you stand your pepper up and cut it down the side, and you open it up. You like unroll it basically. And I'm taking out the seeds. I'm gonna cut off the white ribs on the inside. The ribs can be kind of bitter. If you like bitter flavor, like some people do, then no need to remove this, but I'm just slicing that out. And now, again, I'm slicing this into strips like we did with the pineapple. And one of the best tips is to put your tip of your knife down and just rock it. Rock it down at a nice steady pace. And I want to slice this kind of small. So these strips are like 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick. And I'm going to do the same thing for these pieces of the ends that I cut off. I'm going to slice those into strips as well. And if you have any white parts, you can discard those. Right. And then once we have all the strips, then we turn it 45 degrees and dice it, just like we did with the pineapple. Sometimes if you have a lot of it, it's helpful to just do half at a time. And you want to kind of line up all those pieces roughly and dice it. So I mentioned the phrase mise en place, the French phrase. That means everything in its place. And that is, it's like a French culinary philosophy, but it's used in every kitchen you'll ever be in. Every restaurant, every, big kitchen like we have here, industrial kitchen that we have here at HMS, that phrase is everywhere. So now we're going to do the tomato. I'm going to cut off this end, and I'm going to cut this end off too because it's a little bit yucky looking. And like I said, I'm not doing as much as all of you, so I think your recipe says 2 tomatoes. I'm just going to do 1 here. And again, I cut off this whole top part, but all I want to do is get rid of this stem part. So you can kind of just like cut that part out separately. No reason to throw away that whole top. But so the mise en place practice is to cut everything that's needed for your recipe at once. So I'm standing my tomato on a nice flat spot and I'm about to cut it into planks, as you could have guessed. We're doing the same process for all of these items, most of these items. I've got planks, I laid it down. You can call this like shingling, you're shingling the planks. Then we slice into strips. You're gonna get a lot of practice with cutting things. And probably everybody knows that cutting a tomato is the ultimate test of how sharp your knife is. It can be very challenging if you don't have a sharp knife. So I'm going to cut the ends that we reserved. So we are practicing the mise en place idea in this class. So now I've turned this 45 degrees and I'm going to dice it. We are practicing mise en place because we are cutting all of these things first. The idea is to prepare, cut everything that needs to be cut, mince, dice, whatever it is that you need to do, cut it all, and then cook. All right, so we've got our pineapple, our pepper, our tomato, and we're gonna move on to scallions. I'm gonna cut off the root ends of the scallion. And I'm just gonna slice it nice and thin, especially the white part of the scallion because that has a stronger flavor than the green part. This is like a nice satisfying crunch sound when you cut this. And you don't have to do all of it. You can just cut as much as you'd like to. Then I'm going to stop there. I love a nice cut scallion. It's got like the gradient of white to green. It's so beautiful. All right. And then we have our jalapeno. So jalapeno peppers are a little spicy, as you know. We're going to cut the top off, the stem part. Hold on. I think I might want to change the order of this. I think I'm going to do the jalapeno last for all the cutting because I want to make sure that everyone can wash their hands after they cut the jalapeno. Hopefully you haven't started with your jalapeno yet. So sorry for jumping around. Instead, I'm jumping over to the cilantro here. So this is about like half a bunch of fresh cilantro. And I had written in the recipe, if you have the patience and the time, you can go through and pull all of these individual leaves off the stem. But a really great food saving, food waste preventing and time saving tactic is to just go ahead and chop all the way through, including the stems. So that's what we're going to do to save some time here and reduce our food waste. So I'm going to start at the top here and just slice all the way down to basically like where the bushy leaves end and the stems begin. So there's a little bit of, there's some leaves still left in here. That's okay. You can pull them out by hand, but we're reducing a lot of waste here by just chopping the stems. So I went down one way. I'm going to turn it 45 degrees, just like everything else we've been doing. And I'm going to go through again. Cilantro is an herb that you see used with tacos very often. And cilantro happens to be the way it grows. It can be very like dirty, like the leaves can have a lot of like dirt that gets stuck to them more than other herbs. So definitely make sure you're washing your cilantro well. Also, another tip, if you're going to be scraping things to move them out of the way, it's a good knife sharpness saving trick to, instead of scraping with the blade, flip it over to the non-blade side and scrape with that side. Then you're not dulling your knife scraping. Okie dokie. So now we have some limes that we're going to just cut in half because we're going to be juicing them. So before we cut them in half, we put it down, put one hand over the other and push down a little bit and roll it back and forth. This makes it easier to juice the lime. So got one. Limes, out of all citrus fruits, I think limes are the trickiest to juice. They can be really firm. So this tip definitely helps make it easier for you. But you can do this for lemons, you can do it for oranges, do it for any kind of citrus juice. All right, so we've got the top of the lemon, the stem end of the lemon. We're going to cut it across this way. Or sorry, lime, I mean, not lemon. And we're going to do that for all three of these. All right, so I think all we have left to cut for this section is the jalapeno. So now I'm going to get to this here. So we chopped off the stem already. There's no need to chop off the other end. It's totally fine. Nothing there that needs to be removed. But what we're going to do is slice it lengthwise, same way we did for the bell pepper. It's, you know, small and kind of a weird shape, so it's a little tricky. Just be very, very careful. So I didn't cut it all the way through. I just sliced it open. And we've got all these seeds inside. The seeds are where the heat is. So if you like spicy, leave the seeds. If you are a little bit hesitant about the spice, you can scoop those seeds out. And the easiest way to scoop them out is to do it over a sink and just let the water run. So I'm going to do it that way. So how are you doing, Bev and Cynthia?
Great, I'm with you.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So I'm just rubbing the seeds out. They come out very easily, so that's nice. And again, this white part is like a little bitter, so you might be able to just pull it out with your fingers. But because this pepper is much smaller than a bell pepper, it can be kind of tricky to get that white part out. Be very careful with your fingers. All right, I'm going to do the other half. Okay, so what we're going to do, you can probably guess if you've noticed a pattern with everything we've been doing here. We're going to cut it into strips, turn it 45 degrees, and cut it into cubes. And cut it into very skinny strips because we want to make this jalapeno very small. Because we're only adding a little bit, I think in your recipe it calls for 2 small or 1 large. Again, I'm not making as much as you are, so I'm just doing this one. But, you know, it's not very much jalapeno for the amount of all the other ingredients that we have. So you definitely want to make sure you cut it nice and small so it's easy to, you know, spread it throughout the recipe. All right, so we've got our strips. And I turned it 45 degrees, and now I'm gonna dice it nice and small. And what you can do also is you can kind of treat this like you're mincing it as well. So if you want, after you dice it, you can run your knife over it a couple more times and just like rough chop to make it nice and small. Okay, let's get that off my blade. And yeah, I'm gonna run my knife over a couple more times. I'm rocking it on the tip of the knife, because that's the easiest way to have control over it. All right. So pushing this jalapeno to the side with all my other ingredients. And now we're gonna mix our pineapple salsa. And we're gonna set it aside to let the flavors kind of meld together while we make the rest of the items. So I'm gonna grab a mixing bowl. I'm gonna check my time. All right, doing okay. That's good. So, all right, so we're gonna mix together. We have some black beans. So these are just canned black beans. They're rinsed, drained and rinsed to get the like briny flavor off of the beans. And so you want to have like about the same amount of black beans as you do pineapple. So I'm gonna dump this in my bowl. I'm gonna add, let's see, check my list to make sure. I'm gonna add half of the jalapeno. The other half we're gonna save for the guacamole. Half of the jalapeno that I've cut up goes in here. I'm also gonna do half of the tomato. Okay, and all of the red pepper goes in. And all of the pineapple. And the cilantro, we're gonna do probably half of the cilantro. We're gonna save some of the cilantro for the guacamole and some of it we're saving for a garnish as well at the end. And we're doing all of our scallion. And okay, so we had, I'm gonna go over that again. We had about 3/4 of a cup of black beans. We had all of the pineapple that we diced, which was about 3/4 of a cup. We had half of the tomato we cut, half of the jalapeno we cut, half of the cilantro, and all of the scallion. I hope I didn't miss anything. So now that you've been touching all this stuff and you cut the jalapeno, take a sec to wash your hands very well. I'm gonna change my gloves. Definitely do not touch your face until you've washed your hands. That is a big mistake. So we're going to be adding a few more ingredients to this salsa, and then we're going to set it to the side and let the flavors blend together. Okay, there we go. So we're going to be adding the juice of 2 limes. And this is a lot of juice, so at the end you are going to have like extra liquid at the bottom, but it's important to add enough lime juice that everything gets coated with the lime juice, so that's our plan. If you have a juicer, that makes your life a lot easier, but if not, we did squeeze, or we like rolled and smushed those limes to make them easier to juice. But I'm going to put, we're juicing 4 of the halves, so 2 limes total. Right. And we're also going to be adding some salt in there too, and some black pepper. And that can be to taste. I know everybody has different preferences with that kind of thing. But I encourage you to also just taste this salsa as is before adding salt and pepper. Because it's always fun to like be able to discover like what each of those ingredients actually brings to the dish. Like I should have suggested frying this before putting the lime in there because the lime brings a lot to this dish. All right, so I've got some salt. I'm just gonna do a pinch. I don't want to overdo it because this salsa, the dominant flavors are the scallion. So there's the onion flavor. There's the pineapple, like very sweet pineapple, and the lime, so the citrusy. So you're getting, you know, all these different kinds of flavors in here. So you don't want to kill it with salt. That would make it not as good. So now that we've got all these ingredients in here, I'm going to give it a toss. And like I said, you definitely want to make sure that the lime juice you squeezed in coats everything. And also, because we added a little bit of salt, salt brings the liquid out of these ingredients. So any like juices that are in here, if you add a lot of salt, you're going to have a whole lot more liquid at the bottom of your bowl than you would if you didn't add any salt. It's like an osmosis reaction. The fruit and the vegetables draw the salt in because there's not a lot of salt in there and pushes the liquid out to sort of trade for the salt. So sometimes that's a good thing, but in this case, we don't want to do too much. So this is what this is looking like right now. Lots and lots of different colors. It's really beautiful. So I'm going to go set this aside and we're going to keep on prepping. We're going to move on to the ingredients for the cauliflower. Any questions so far? No? I guess that's a good thing. I'm just cleaning up my board here a little bit. So I've still got off to the side, I've still got some ingredients that I've reserved. All right, I'm gonna put this pineapple here. Okay, so we are now moving on to our cauliflower. So I've got a half a head of cauliflower. This was a pretty big head of cauliflower, so I'm only going to be using half. You could, I think in the recipe I said 1 large head or 2 small. So I'm making a little bit less than you all, but this is what we've got here. So I pulled, you know, any of the leaves that were on the bottom, I pulled those leaves off, but we are going to be using this stalk here. Normally we cut all the florets off and this gets thrown away, but we're going to be using this tonight. All right, so this is a pretty like rough way of chopping this, but it's makes it easy. So you can see obviously the stalk is here. This is the big stalk. I'm just going to use my knife and basically go around and cut the florets off. And then I've got some more on the side here. And I'm gonna, so this is what we have left of our stalk. I'm gonna just set this aside. I'm not throwing it away because we're gonna use this. So I'm setting that aside. And what you wanna do, I'm gonna grab a bowl to make this easier. If you'd like, you can just push it to the side of your cutting board or whatever's easier. But I'm gonna be cutting this cauliflower into pretty small florets. I want them to be like, you know, 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches. And when you look at the width, I want to get it to focus. When you look at the width of the stem, if you have a floret with a very thick stem, cut it in half lengthwise because the stem is what takes longer to cook because it's dense. So if you have a thick stem, cut it in half. So some of the florets will just easily break off after you cut it. But what I'm doing is I'm standing it on the floret end and I'm cutting down the stem to make nice little florets. The reason we're making them so small is, you've probably heard me say this in past classes, is because the smaller you cut something, the faster it cooks. So one of the best tricks for getting your meal done in an hour is making sure you cut anything that needs to be cooked small. So I'm making sure that the stalks are cut skinny. So I think also cauliflower, same with broccoli, which is very similar to cauliflower. Everyone has a different preference for how they like it cooked. So that will determine obviously how long it takes you to cook as well, because you want to cook it to your liking. And we're cooking this cauliflower in a pot instead of on, in the oven. So that requires sort of a different method, which I'll explain when we're cooking. So this cauliflower is definitely not the repetitive pattern of slicing and dicing like we saw. This is kind of just like cut wherever you think needs to be cut. It's a very different kind of thing. But with the cauliflower stalk, we are going to be doing the planks and the dice. So using cauliflower stalk and actually like cutting it and cooking it with the rest of the cauliflower, think about what percentage of the entire head of cauliflower you would be throwing away if you threw away this whole stalk. That's a lot, So you end up, anytime you throw away food that can be used, you also throw away money. So nobody wants to do that. Ripped apart. Almost there with this cauliflower. Again, I'm standing it on the floret end and I'm cutting down into the stalk because I want to try and have as much control as I can over the size and thickness of the stalk. So the way we're cooking this, the cauliflower is going to get, nice and soft. It's going to be tossed with a bunch of different spices. It's going to have the toasted walnuts in it as well for added texture. So the florets don't need to be like beautiful, big fluffy florets. There are some dishes that may call for that. And in that case, you probably wouldn't cut it this same way. But because this is all going to get cooked down, the way of cutting it that we are doing is totally fine. All right, so I've got all my florets in this bowl, and now we're going to get to our stalk. So I am going to cut a little bit off that end that was there when we bought this, because that's like extra tough. So I'm going to cut just a little bit. And this is a weird shape, but we're going to do the same thing that we did. We're going to cut planks, even though it's not really going to look like planks. These are going to be about 1/4 inch thick. All right, so we've got something that resembles planks. We're going to lay them down on top of each other like we did with the other items. We're going to slice them into strips. And turn it 45 degrees and dice it. So these are going to be diced smaller than 1/2 inch because we want these to cook. So this is what we ended up with. This is cauliflower stem, just like the stem that's left on the florets. So why would we not eat that? All right. So we're going to prepare 2 other ingredients for the cauliflower dish. First one is garlic. We're just going to mince this garlic. I'm going to cut off this little root end for both. Let me wipe off my knife first. All right, so I'm cutting the root end off and then I'm gonna slice it. These are basically baby planks. Slicing nice and small, rocking on the tip of the knife. And with garlic, you know, you cut it down and down and down, and then eventually it's taller than it is wide. And it would be easier for you if you just put it down on the flat side. Instead of like continuing to try and cut it like this, once you cut off enough that you can just stand it up, that is a safer way of doing it. So that's what we're gonna do. Whenever you have a big flat part of whatever you're cutting, always have it stand on that big flat part. Because that just makes it way less likely that you'll have any kind of knife slipping or finger injury. So I'm slicing these 2 garlic cloves nice and thin. Right, and then I'm putting them in a pile, and because this is so small, I'm just gonna start the rocking back and forth motion rather than cutting into strips and cubes. It's always kind of satisfying being nearby these kitchens at work here. You know, you can hear when the cooks and the chefs are all chopping things, their knives are going super, super fast. Like, it's very satisfying to watch a professional chef cut something and to hear them knowing that they have, like, their knife really is an extension of their arm. So I'm not quite there. I'm doing my best, but the more you practice cutting things, the better off you'll be. So I'm putting this garlic aside. I'm not putting it in the bowl with the cauliflower because they're going in at different times. So I'm just pushing that aside. Now we're doing our onion. So onions, there's the root end. So it was facing this way in the ground. The roots came out this way and the greens came up this way. So you don't want to cut off this root when you're going to dice an onion. You want to leave the root attached. We're going to cut off the end where the stem was. Put it down on the flat part and cut it in half through the root, but leave the root attached to the remainder of the onion because you can see all of the layers of the onion, they meet at the root. So the root is going to be helpful when we're dicing. So now that I've cut this in half, I'm going to peel the outer layers. It's hard to do with these gloves on, but do my best. Definitely easier at home when you don't have gloves on. Okay. Good enough. I'm gonna do my other half as well. Sometimes it's easier to just peel the whole top layer of the onion. All right. So we're gonna do another fun culinary trick to dice this onion. So you can see, I'm gonna show this wider one. Okay. So you see the layers of the onion like this. You see the layers of the onion going in a different direction on the bottom. So what you're gonna do is lay it flat on this side. And you're gonna take your knife, and the root is right here. You're gonna take your knife and slice it toward the root, but do not go all the way through the root. You're gonna slice a few times. All right, so you've got slices like this across. And then you take your knife and you're gonna go this way. So this is the root. You're gonna, again, the tip of the knife is not going all the way to the top of the onion. Oof, of course, my eyes are starting to sting with this onion, but that's what happens. So we're slicing downward. So now we've got slices going this way and the natural onion. So now that we've got all those slices made, we're gonna slice down and it's gonna be diced for us. This definitely takes some time to learn. It's tricky. It definitely is tricky. And when you get to the end, you can just kind of lay it on the big wide flat part and chop it all up. So like I said, it's tricky, but it does, the more you do it, the easier it gets. Same with all of these tricks. So you can give it a quick chop, get anything you missed, and then do the same for the other half. But for me, because I'm making less, I'm not gonna do the other half. But you would do that same process. Oh, my eyes. Okay. So, how's everybody doing at home? Bev and Cynthia, you doing okay cooking? Hopefully.
And how big are you suggesting these chops to be? Are these onion slices?
The onion, like
Dice.
the dices came out like this size.
Okay. Okay.
So depending on the size of your onion, I had like maybe a medium-sized onion. And when I did the slices this way, I did 3, and then I did maybe like 6 across.
Okay.
And maybe 8.
Okay. All right.
You want to aim for like a quarter inch.
Quarter inch. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so now I'm moving over my burner here because we're going to start on the cauliflower, and I'm realizing I'm kind of cynical, so gotta get cracking here. All right, so I'm going to turn this on. So you can buy toasted, pre-toasted walnuts, or you can just do regular walnuts that are not toasted, whichever you prefer. Toasted walnuts do have a very interesting, like, developed flavor, if you want to go that route. But the walnuts are chopped, and we're going to be adding those in at the end. So right now I have my burner on like medium, maybe medium high, probably medium. And I've got a little bit of canola oil in there. And I'm going to start with the onion. So the onion that we just chopped is all going right into this pot. And I'm using a Dutch oven just because this is a nice, like, deep, heavy pot. So you can mix things around and not have to worry about not having enough space. So I'm stirring around this onion. We're just gonna stir it around for like a minute or 2. Something that is a good indicator that your onion is ready to be moved on to the next step is when the onion becomes translucent. You may have seen that in recipes before. I mean, I think I put it in our recipe, but that's just a good sign that the onion is really breaking down. So just moving this around. This burner that I have works super fast, so good on that. The next step here is we're gonna add our spices. So we're doing 4 different spices in the cauliflower tonight. I have them all here. We've got smoked paprika. This is a chili powder. So the recipe I listed cayenne, but we're using a chili powder here. So I'm doing a bit more than for the cayenne because cayenne is more spicy than chili powder. And then these 2 look the same, but they're different. One is cumin and one is coriander. So I'm actually going to add the spices right now because we're going to toast them a little bit. Toasting spices really helps to develop a flavor. So just going to toss that around. I don't want to let them burn, so I'm going to make sure to mix it. So those 4 spices that we're adding, they all have like a different kind of flavor. So the cayenne is spicy. The smoked paprika, it's a smoky flavor. So that's a really great thing to add to vegetarian dishes or vegan dishes like this, because it gives you like a little bit more of a flavor, like you are eating meat or something because of the smokiness. Coriander, which is actually the seed of cilantro. Coriander is a very like floral kind of like herbal flavor. And then cumin is a nice like earthy flavor that's used a lot in South American cuisine. So the origins of tacos definitely had cumin. So those have been toasted. Now I'm adding my garlic. So also the spices that we're using are spices that you would find if you bought like a taco mix. All right, so I added my garlic. I'm also going to add my tomato paste. So I have 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. Tomato paste is just dehydrated tomatoes, not fully dehydrated because it's not a powder, but it is dehydrated enough that it's not liquidy. You know, when we were cutting those tomatoes before, you saw how liquidy they were. So this is not liquidy. It's a nice thick paste that's a concentrated tomato flavor. So I'm just mixing this all around. And you can see that stuff is getting stuck to the bottom of my pan, which is completely fine and expected, because what we're going to do is add a little bit of water to deglaze the pan, which means it's helping to unstick all the flavor that's been stuck to the bottom. And it incorporates it back into our dish. All right. So I'm also going to add a smidge of salt right now. And in goes our cauliflower. And I'm going to toss the cauliflower around. And I'm going to add a little bit of water. Like I said, we're going to deglaze the bottom. So you should hear it sizzle when you add the water. Only like, you know, a quarter cup maybe. And once you add that water, if you can see it's all bubbly on the bottom there, that water becomes a part of like the sauce. And it helps to incorporate all of the spices that we're using into all the little folds of the cauliflower. So I'm scraping the bottom. The wooden spoon really is the best tool for this because a wooden spoon doesn't scratch your pot. So this cauliflower is getting nice and coated with all these spices. This looks awesome. Smells super good too. So all of my water has now been evaporated. I'm going to add a smidge more. And I'm going to put the lid on. So that water is going to both help prevent burning by preventing things from getting stuck to the bottom. And it's going to help to steam the cauliflower. So I'm going to put this lid on. And I'm going to move this to the side and just let it cook. Right now it's on medium. And we're going to make our guacamole. So you can leave your cauliflower alone. Put the lid on to help trap the liquid and help it get steamed. And we're going to do cauliflower or do guacamole now. Okay. So again, I'm not going to be making quite as much as you all at home with the number of servings that were in the recipe. So I'm just going to do 1 avocado here, but you're going to take your avocado. So this is the stem end. This is the bottom. So it goes like this. I'm going to cut it top to bottom. So it opens it up in the widest part. So you push your knife through until you feel the pit. And then you just roll your knife around it and twist the halves and pull them apart. And the quickest way to get your pit out is pull your hand away and chop it. And then you twist the pit right out. And then you very carefully use your hand to pull it off the blade. So I'm going to grab a spoon here and just scoop this avocado straight into a mixing bowl. The ideal texture of an avocado for guacamole is not to choose the mushiest avocado you've ever felt, but a little bit firmer than that. If it's super, super mushy, then it just kind of becomes like a paste. And what you want is to have a little bit more, like, a little bit more bite. Okay, so I'm scooping out all the avocado meat from the inside here. And if you have a fork or a masher even, either of those will work. I'm gonna use a fork and I'm just gonna squish this. If you've ever tried making avocado toast at home, a fork is the best tool to squish it onto your bread. I remember the first time I made avocado toast, I tried to use the back of a spoon and I was like, why is this not working? What is wrong with me? It was too slippery. And then when I figured out that a fork is a better tool, I was like, oh, okay. So it's kind of the same idea as like you want a sharp knife to get a good grip. The tines of the fork give you a good grip on the slippery avocado. All right. So we've got our avocado mashed. We are gonna juice our remaining lime. So there should be 2 halves of lime left. And the lime juice is what's going to prevent the avocado from browning. So that's definitely necessary in this recipe. We're also going to do almost all of our remaining cilantro. We want to save a little bit more for garnish. We're going to do all of our remaining tomato and all of our remaining jalapeno. So this bowl has avocado, lime juice, cilantro, tomato, and jalapeno. And I'm gonna mix this all together and then give it a taste and see if it needs salt and pepper. Maybe it doesn't. Everybody has different preferences with that stuff. So guacamole, I was reading about it. Guacamole is said to have been around since maybe as early as like the 1500s in Mexico. They were back then making something very, very similar to this, like almost with the exact same ingredients. So this is a very old recipe. And it's lasted for good reason because it's delicious. So I'm gonna taste it, see if I need salt and pepper. Maybe a little bit. Just a smidge. Wow, that's so good. I know we're almost at 6:30 now, so thanks for hanging in with me. All right, so this guacamole is all mixed. I'm gonna check on the cauliflower. It looks like it's steaming. Let me put this over here. I'll show you what I've got here. So again, I'm scraping what's down at the bottom, scraping all the stuff that's stuck down there. This is starting to get nice and soft. And yeah, there is still a little bit of liquid down the bottom and it's basically like a sauce. I want to try and scoop it to show you. It's a little hard to show, but it's got like a nice sauce down there. So I'm just gonna put this cauliflower back on the burner while I get the rest of the assembly prepared. I'm gonna grab a plate and the tortillas. Take my gloves off at this point. All right, so we're using flour tortillas, but flour tortillas are not like the traditional type of tortilla that would be used for a taco. Corn is a native plant to Mexico. So corn tortillas were always the ones that were made traditionally. And then when colonizers came from Spain, they brought wheat with them. And now wheat is grown in northern Mexico. So you will see, nowadays, you will see flour tortillas in northern Mexico, but corn tortillas are really the classic. So the reason I chose to use flour tortillas is because you can bend a tortilla made of flour way more easily than you can bend a corn tortilla. Corn tortillas, I did put it in the instructions in your recipe. If you would like to, you can put a burner, or put a pan on a burner over like low heat and just heat both sides for 1 or 2 minutes and just make it a little soft. But it's not necessary with flour tortillas. It is necessary for corn tortillas. Corn tortillas, if you do that, they'll crack on the bottom, or if you don't do that rather. If they're cold or room temp, they'll crack on the bottom and all your taco filling falls out the middle. So flour tortillas are definitely best. How's everybody's cauliflower doing? Hopefully it's doing okay. Mine's definitely starting to cook down.
Mine definitely doesn't have as much sauce as yours.
Well, it might
Yeah,
be just adding like a smidge more water.
Water, and it was probably the head of cauliflower I had, maybe was bigger.
Maybe.
You know?
Yeah, it could be. You could also add like a bit more tomato paste if you wanted.
Yeah.
Typically tomato paste would be added like before the cauliflower goes in, but you could add a little bit more just to coat it. But for the sake of time, I don't want to keep people longer than they need to stay. I'm going to assemble a couple tacos. So one option for the guacamole, you could put your toppings in here and plop some guacamole on top, but it's kind of hard to manage sometimes, messy guacamole. So what I like to do is take some and just spread it on the inside. Spread a little bit in there. Then I'm gonna put my cauliflower in here. All right, let me scoop this out. And I'll pull it over to the camera so you can see it well. We've got our cauliflower and the onions that are in there. The spices are all incorporated.
Is the cauliflower still a little bit what's the word I want? Is it super soft or is it?
It's not super soft. You can absolutely cook it until it's very soft.
Okay, but leave a little crunch.
Yeah, it's good to have a little bit of texture still. Otherwise, it just becomes like mush. So if you have a little bit of crunch still, it makes it like kind of like a more satisfying like eating experience. Like it makes it more interesting to bite into something that's got some crunch to it. And oh, I forgot to mix the walnuts into the cauliflower, but you can also use them as a topping. So that's what I'll be doing. I'm gonna grab the salsa also. So make sure you give your salsa a good mix because like I said, the liquid is down at the bottom. Salsa is nice and colorful in there. Looks great. Then we also have some Cotija cheese. I love to block a bit so you can see what it looks like when it's not crumbled, but it crumbles very easily. You just smush it between your fingers and it crumbles, but it keeps a nice firm texture. So I'm gonna do some of this. Garnish. I'm gonna do some walnuts as a garnish. And I've got a little bit of cilantro left. And now we've got this super overloaded, really delicious, layered taco. Trying to show all the layers falling all over the plate. But we've got our guacamole, we have our cauliflower, the salsa, cotija cheese, cilantro, and walnuts on top. So it's really, really lots of interesting flavors and textures combined with each other. Sweet, spicy, creamy, savory, herbal, floral, so many different spices in one, so many different flavors in one dish. So these are the kinds of plant-forward meals that we like to make in this class, because when you eat this, it's not lacking for anything. You're not missing the meat because you have all the spices that you use in meat that's in the cauliflower instead. And you've got all these really filling, the beans, the nuts, the tortilla itself all have protein and healthy fats. So you're filling yourself up physically and you're mentally satisfying yourself by making such an interesting and flavorful dish. So I can assemble a couple more tacos while the rest of you are catching up, but how's it going at home, Cynthia? So you're doing okay?
Yeah, just have to warm up the tortillas and
Yeah. Are you using corn tortilla or wheat?
you know what? I have some flour ones heated up, and also some of the Trader Joe's has a corn and flour tortilla
Oh,
that's isn't brittle like a full out corn.
yeah.
So it's a little smaller
Right.
than a flour one, and I kind of prefer those. So I
Yeah,
have a little of both.
that's a great idea. Perfect. So yeah, those probably would need to be warmed up a little bit. You
Yeah,
could
just a
warm
little.
each side just for like a minute or two. And you can like test it and see if it's easy to like fold it in half and if it's okay. So I'm gonna add a little more salsa to this one. Add our walnut topping here. So like I said, you can mix the walnuts in with your cauliflower and make it one combined topping, or you can just do the walnuts as a garnish. I'm gonna make one more and stand it up here.
The little extra tomato paste did the trick.
Oh,
With a
good.
little water. Yeah.
That's great. Tomato paste is so delicious. I mean, tomatoes, really. Tomatoes have so many different uses, and the flavor changes completely when it's raw to when it's cooked. It's paste, or if it's like roasted tomatoes, they taste so different every time.
Those
So
are beautiful.
yeah.
Those are beautiful.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, so I was talking about using the spices and stuff in the cauliflower that you would normally use for meat. That is, I think, the trick, honestly, to making plant-forward meals really delicious. It's putting in the same effort that you would do for a meat dish. Why do vegetables not deserve as much attention as meat? That's definitely not true. Want to put I learned a cute little trick from our chef. You can chop a lime in half or in quarters and use it as like the bookends on the tacos to hold them up.
Ah, great idea.
Yeah, so cute.
Beautiful.
These like they're so overloaded. So I always do a test run before. Oh, it looks like Ashley's been having a hard time. I always do a test run for these classes the night before. And so like I said, I make these, I bring them home, and my boyfriend and I have them for dinner. And it's always fun to hear his approval. He really likes beans though. So I guess he's different than the both of you and your husbands. Oh, you're muted, Beth. Looks like you're muted, Bev. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was just
there you
saying, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope yours are coming out great.
Yep, I think
We're
they're about ready to
definitely
go.
off now, but awesome.
Thank you,
Cynthia,
Eliza.
how are you doing, Cynthia? Good?
Great.
Awesome.
My husband is pacing in the background. I think he's waiting.
He smell it. He knows it's gonna be good.
Yep.
That's awesome. I'm so glad.
Thank
Well, yeah,
you.
I'll let you both go. I really appreciate
Thank
you
you
staying
so
on a little
much.
longer. I hope you and your husbands and your families enjoy your dinner, and I hope that we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Trustee.
you very
Thank you,
much.
Eliza. Bye-bye. Good
Have a
night.
great night.
Bye, Sue.
Bye.